Alright, what's good YouTube? So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to make a new wave synthetic type beat for Yeat. Basically, I'm going to be breaking down the formula that practically every beat on his recent album, 2 Alive, follows. Real quick, before this video starts, if you want any of the sounds or samples that I use in this tutorial, there's a link in the description where you can download them completely free. Also, there's a new free MIDI kit I'm going to be dropping in my Discord. There's going to be a bunch of fire melodies in there. Go get it. It's completely free. Instagram and Twitter, FinnaFinesse, make sure to go follow that. And yeah, let's get into it. Starting with the melodies. So unlike with other tutorials, Yeat melodies tend to not really fall into any sort of scale because Yeat's voice is pretty diverse in that way. But do note that his voice is usually going to be falling along with the top note of the chord progression that you use in your beat. So just constantly keep in mind like what his voice would sound like rapping on your beat, and don't stress about using a very specific scale because there really isn't one for most of these songs. Also, the melodies don't normally fall into like these higher octaves up here, but again, that all really comes down to like what frequencies you're using. Also, one thing that's important to understand is that these beats generally tend to sit between the tempo ranges of 135 and 148. I'd strongly recommend just starting at 140 by default when making your beats. Also, the biggest key for his melodies. So I said a while back with the drum pattern tutorial where I talked about like common 808 patterns that most beats use. Well, for the melodies, specifically the chords, you want to follow that same general rhythm that I was talking about. So for example, something like this. As for the notes that we're using, Yeat progressions are almost always made up with sustained chords, meaning you want to lay out a normal 1-3-5 progression like this, but what you want to do is then delete the third note and either use the second or the fourth. So for this case, the second would be the F sharp down here, and the fourth would be the A4 right there. And basically, you just want to like go through these and choose whichever one you like, and just go through a basic progression using this. And then what you want to do is just mess with the voicings as you like. So what you can do is something like this, or maybe you can like pitch this up like this. It really depends on how you're feeling. But the main reason why sustained chords work is because Yeat beats have a lot of like anthemic vibes to them, but at the same time there's a little bit of a darkness to them, and that's created by using a lot of sustained notes and tension, but also keeping it anthemic by having like massive gaps between our notes and having big jumps between the progressions. Okay, so listen, I know some of you are definitely not following along with what I'm talking about, and that's fine. So what I did was I went ahead and I made this little template with all these chords pre-arranged for you guys. That's going to be attached with the link in the description. What you can do is just mess around with these chords and find a little structure that you like, and just mess with the sustained notes that I have pitched up like this, and just choose ones that you like and just mess around with it. That's just going to make the whole process so much easier for you. As for the actual VSTs and sounds to use, for Yeat type beats, there's a vast amount of VSTs that you can use that work. Some of my favorites include Serum, Purity. Serum's pretty good. Another good one is Fab Filter Twin 2. You can also try using Serum, as well as Serum is one of those VSTs that I find works really well. Get the point? So as for the types of sounds to use, I'd say use a lot of like dry sounds. And for those who are OG fans who have seen that Pierre tutorial, one thing I talked about that he does is he uses a lot of sounds that don't have a lot of tail end or fade to them. And the reason he does this is it allows us to create a lot of rhythm with the melodies we make, because for Yeat type beats as well as Pierre ones, they're super busy and there's a lot of instruments playing at the same time. So if you don't get it, same idea kind of applies to 808s. So if you think about what makes an 808 hit hard is the change or dip in frequencies. That's why when you're making your 808s bouncier, what people tend to do is they'll just go into the out knob and they'll tighten the 808. That's why when the next 808 or sound hits, there's going to be a bigger change in the frequencies, which is what's going to make it hit harder. But anyway, last thing in regards to making your melody, usually these beats have a lot of like sounds playing. So when you do use a lot of stuff, I'd recommend making sure you have like your sounds not overstay their welcome, because you really need to leave space when you do that. So for example, and yeah, that's it for melodies. So now let's go over how you make the drums. So the 808s that tend to get used for these beats, they're normally really like loud and stretched out and have a lot of sub bass to them. Good kits for this would be like the Nick Mare or BWB ones, or just some Reddit Playboy Cardi Pierreborn drum kit. And the drums are always like very simple for these beats. Again, a lot of the rhythm is coming from the melody, so we don't want to overdo it with the drums. As for the hi-hats, almost every single Yeat beat follows like one of these like 2-step patterns. You can just put them in as you please. Apart from that, it's really just about simplicity, not like having an insane amount of perks or insane amount of like FX, snares hitting all the time, ridiculous amount of rolls all over the place. You know, you want it to be simple. final tips I want to give it that I found very helpful. When you make these types of beats, it really helps a lot when you go into your master and you just turn the volume down like this by default when you're making the melody. Doing this is going to make it so like your ears aren't bleeding after making like 3 beats. You know, when you finish the melody, you can always just turn it up afterwards. But I promise you this is going to help in the long run if you're really trying to grind out making these beats. Also, don't feel the need to like constantly cut out the low end of every single melody that you make, because I've noticed a lot of times with these types of beats that the 808s tend to blend really well with like the lower, harsher frequencies. And finally, I know it's kind of a meme at this point, but don't feel the need to add like the church bell FX just because it's used in like so many of his tracks. Never mind, use it in every track. You know what I mean though, you don't need to like specifically add the church bell. You can use other sounds, like for example, one sound that I'll give you guys that comes out of my Most Wanted Volume 1 kit that I use a lot in these types of beats is this FX Deep C sound. And what you want to do as you're structuring it, around the point where like the second chorus is starting to come in, that's usually where like those FX start to hit. So what I did was I used that FX Deep C preset and I just have it hitting on the 1 in this old beat I made. That sounds like this. Also, one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to bring up earlier, the best sound banks for these types of beats are the synthetic Serum Banks. I don't have them loaded up on here, but they're really good, unique sounds for these types of beats. I know a lot of the producers who have tracks for Yeat, or just people in general who use Serum in their beats, use those banks a lot, so I'd strongly recommend checking them out. But yeah, apart from that, that's everything you need to know to make a new synthetic beat for Yeat. Instagram and Twitter at FinnaFinesse. Go get that MIDI kit in the Discord with the link in the description. New videos in the near future. And yeah, I'm out. Peace. All right, what's good, you?